So welcome back to Will I Vike It. I'm with my guest today, Ian Thackray.
Hello.
Who is a blacksmith.
Yes.
So how did you get started in the blacksmith trade?
The quick answer is I was unemployed and needed a job.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. And it literally was that. It was 2008, the last big recession.
Yeah.
I'd been made unemployed from my office job and was just flicking through the local paper, and there was, amongst everything, there was just an advert saying extra hand needed in a busy forge, call Jim on this phone number.
Yeah.
Gave him a call, lied through my interview, said that I knew exactly what to do with metalwork, and got the job, and it just went from there, really.
Okay.
So
it's an interesting approach. So what was from that? So that was more modern blacksmithing, I'm guessing?
So welding, fabrication.
Yeah.
It evolved into doing historical and archaeological ironwork because history has always been a huge passion of mine. Right from an early age, I grew up with Time Team and Meet the Ancestors, programs like that. And as I started working as a blacksmith, I also in the evenings was looking online. It was around the time where YouTube and apps like that were beginning to come out, and I was just astounded by what was possible with metalwork and what had been made as well. And pretty much from the word go, I was never really interested in the knives, the swords, the axes and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was more how household items had developed, had progressed, had been modified over the centuries to what we have today, when actually things like frying pans, saucepans, grills, kettles, all these sorts of things have been around for millennia.
Yeah.
And just found that actually I quite enjoyed making these things that had been used on a daily basis.
So was there much difference once you sort of moved into the historical stuff? Is the construction and blacksmithing the same? Like, has it ever changed over time, or? Yes
and no. The tools have changed, but other than that, you are still taking metal. You're getting it hot and you're hitting it. The huge difference is the fact that to make one of those knives, for instance, you would have had to get the iron ore, get the charcoal, smelted it, refined it into a usable billet, and then forged into the object you want. Whereas now, I can phone up my local steel yard in Shaftesbury, and the next day, the day after, it's on the doorstep, ready to go.
Okay.
But we still use hammers, we still use fire, whether it's charcoal, coal, coke, gas. Other than that, it's all pretty much still the same sort of tradition and craft as it was, back 2,000 years ago.
Okay. So you've done some interesting projects. Yes. I have been checking out your Instagram, I must admit. So I know recently you did the project at Chalk Valley.
Yes.
Well, I'll let you explain it because you know what you did.
So the Chalk Valley project for 2022 was the culmination for me of 10 years worth of research, and it was recreating the earliest known iron artifacts, which were beads forged from meteorites. And so I found a meteorite called Gebel Kamil, which I didn't literally find it, but I was able to get a piece of meteorite called Gebel Kamil, which landed in Egypt around 5,000 years ago. And with my friend Will Sherman, he and I forged this meteorite, this lump of rock, space rock, into these beads using ancient Egyptian, so 5,000-year-old Egyptian technologies as well, because we could do it with a hammer and an anvil in about 20 minutes, but standing there with blowpipes and with stone hammers, stone anvils, kneeling down on the ground all day long with COVID as well, post-COVID run.
Sure.
It just made it far more of a challenge, and was a lot more rewarding when we were able to complete it.
Yeah. So that's obviously like a lifelong dream that you got to do that project. Are there any others that you can think of? Like,
I think what I enjoy doing with the archaeological work is recreating items that people just don't believe existed. So, for instance, Dorchester Museum have got ship's anchor as we would see it, as we would recognise it today, but it was made in the Iron Age,
Right.
and is a lot bigger than what people assume Iron Age blacksmiths were capable of. I mean, it's one of these ones. I know you've had Tom on this show as well.
Yeah.
He and I have always said, and actually all blacksmiths we've always agreed that the trouble is, the further back in history you go, the more people think, oh, they were just little simpletons, didn't really know what they were doing. And so creating these objects that make people look at it and go, oh, and just amaze them that this was made without the modern tools and equipment that we know and love today.
Yeah.
So I think I've got a laundry list of stuff I need to do, from this ship's anchor through to some of the cookware that was carried around by Henry VIII's army, where they would just roast entire oxen on this giant spit, things like that.
Yeah.
I'd love to get around to making.
I had a question I was going to ask you later, but it kind of ties in, so we'll do it now. Is if you had an unlimited budget, what is your dream project?
Can we come back to that at the end?
We can come back to it at the end, yeah. I just thought it kind of tied in with what you were saying there, so I thought it might be a good time to ask.
I think, if I'm honest with you, limiting the budget is actually half the fun.
Yeah.
Because, with an unlimited budget, the sky's the limit, the means the limit. But it's restricting the budget and saying, I can make this for this amount of money. That's half of the challenge. And it's like with yourself. If I was to give you an unlimited budget, how far would you go? And whereas saying I've got £1,000 or I've got £100 sets your limit, but you will want to do the best you can for that budget. And so I think having a budget is a good standpoint.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's a similar aspect for me with food. It's part of the reason why I like doing the historical food. Is you're limited on your ingredients and your cookware and things, and so you're working within limitations. Yeah. To be honest, even sometimes that's the fun of making vegan food. You need to make stuff that tastes good, but with the limited ingredients. Whereas if you've got all the ingredients in the world, yes, you can make something that tastes good. Yeah. But can you do it on a limited?
But then, when you're cooking for people, how many times do you give someone a dish to try, and when you tell them that this is what the Vikings or the Saxons or the medieval or the Roman people ate, how often do they just look at you like you're mad?
I mean, most of the time, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult as well with the Saxon period. They weren't writing recipes that early. I mean, the idea of a cookbook to a Saxon or a Viking wouldn't make sense because it involves going out, getting certain ingredients to make that recipe. Yeah. Whereas they're going to use what they've got, chuck it all in a pot and cook it. Yeah. Most of the time. Yeah. You're only going to, unless you're having a feast, maybe you might have gone out of your way to get certain ingredients to show off. Yeah. But, So we're on to talking about food, so I think we should. So what I've done is I've cooked you up 3 options for maybe what they might have cooked on the Mastermyr Grill, which is the thing I really got you here to talk about, as you know. Yes. So Ian actually made the grill for me. When was it? Early this year? Was it last year?
I'm going to say early this year.
I think it might have been. Yeah. And you kindly dropped it off here for me, the ATC. Yeah. And I've been playing with it all year. Lots of cooking, doing courses on it. I've cooked various things. People say you can't cook sausages on it. You can. You just need a Cumberland sausage. Yep. So today my options are a salt dough wrapped leg of lamb, which has been stuffed with rosemary and garlic. So it's a little bit lavish. Maybe they wouldn't have wasted the salt and the flour, and they could have used clay instead. But the salt really does add to the flavour of the meat. We've got a wild venison and garlic sausage. Funnily enough, actually, the venison came from a place just up the road, Creech Hill. Oh, yeah. They supplied the deer for a course I did in Wales back in beginning of October. Yeah, fantastic. So it's local venison. Yeah. And then we've got some leeks that have just been charred in the embers, and I've put some of my favourite cheese on top. Brilliant. So I will Do me some out.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely fantastic.
A bit of leek.
Yeah.
As I say, I would normally put hazelnuts on there as well. I've misplaced my hazelnuts.
Oh no, that's absolutely brilliant. I can imagine the hazelnuts for you. There you go. Is it right just to tuck in?
Yeah, tuck in. And I thought as we're going, we can discuss a bit about the Mastermyr find, which I gather you know quite a bit about. It's a 1936 find.
So, 1936, I think it was written up in 1938. It was somewhere around that time, so pre-Second World War. And it was found purely by accident by a farmer tilling his field, and he hooked his plough, or there was a huge chain that was wrapped around this chest, which hooked onto his plough.
Yeah.
And so he was dragging this thing along, and thankfully he called the right people who came along, opened the chest, and they found it was around 120, 125 pieces of metalwork from, ranging from grills like the one that you've got, carpentry tools, blacksmithing equipment, household cooking implements, items that are clearly being repaired. There was a travelling blacksmith's kit as well, and so we assume he was an itinerant metal worker, because also the field where it was found had been marshy bogland, and so most likely he was in a boat that had capsized and the chest went straight down, and no bodies have been found, and so we presume he survived.
It'd be a terrible loss of all that equipment.
Yes, I'd hate to think how long it took him to make all of that to begin with. But as I said, it was one of these fantastic things that gave us such a valuable insight into the daily life, because normally we find heavily corroded artifacts in graves, or occasionally slightly better, it's like iron finds. But because of the preservative nature of the bog, these things were almost completely and utterly intact. I'm going to have something to eat, because this is
tuck it in.
phenomenal.
Do I know a lot of the time the grill itself is listed as being maybe lighting for a blacksmith, where they might have put tarred logs on it to light a room. And I think we're both of the same opinion that potentially it's a cooking grill. It was found with pots and things as well, wasn't it? So it's...
My thought is that it's very portable, because it's got a chain hanging mechanism which collapses in, so it is literally flat pack. If I had something containing tarred logs or heavy or high resin branches, I would want something a lot sturdier, that wouldn't spin and sway around if you accidentally bumped into it.
Yeah,
because
which it does a lot when you're cooking.
I can imagine.
Absolutely.
And because it's got the original one had the gaps between the bars, any of the embers are just going to land on the floor. So if you're in your workshop at night and you bump into it, you're just going to start swinging embers all over the place.
Very impractical.
Very impractical, but something that actually, I'll probably end up making one for myself and giving it a try to see if it works and how much light it can actually illuminate.
Yeah.
But then, this is the key part of historical metalwork, historical crafts work, and also experimental archaeology. It's just giving these things a try. So.
Yeah, I think until you try stuff.
Oh, wow.
There's there's that element.
That sausage is good. I'm going to crack them with the lamb.
Have a go.
Yeah.
People can just listen to us eat.
Because I've never had salt dough cooked lamb before. That is absolutely phenomenal.
One of the most popular things I've ever made at events and things. People always ask me to make it if I'm going to cook for the group. It's always the salt dough lamb. Sometimes I will use like a haunch of venison. I mean, you could use any meat, but
yeah,
it needs to be the sort of stuff you can eat pink, because there's no way to check if it's fully cooked until you've opened it. Yeah, that's been on now for 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours today, and it's still pink in the middle. But if you did that with a bit of chicken or pork, could be a bit questionable.
Yeah.
But a bit of beef. I've seen people do it with fish.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff isn't good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can believe that. Believe it with
but
fish.
Lamb is a favourite. It's got a nice bit of fat to it as well. So yeah, so the grill does seem to be fairly common, I think, because the idea of it being a light is based on other examples from around Europe. I think even in Russia, places like that, they've had similar ones that I don't know a lot about them, but presumably...
I've never seen one, if I'm honest with you. It doesn't mean to say that they don't exist as lamps, but as I said, I haven't knowingly seen an example used of that, and so yeah, I just don't know. But I mean, in the book, they do reference the ethnoarchaeology showing that it was used in Gotland, which is where the Mastermyr find was, in Sweden, Norway, and as you said, I think into Russia as well. But again, it's one or two examples rather than every rural household. And we know that in 1936, some of these areas of Scandinavia still were much like the late 19th century. Really, they hadn't advanced hugely or significantly really until sort of a bit later on, because of the remoteness. In the depths of winter, they would be isolated, and so they would stick to the old ways that they knew, and were simpler times to be able to live and maintain yourself. So, pardon me.
Sign of enjoying the food.
Oh, yeah, it really is.
Did you have a favourite? If you've obviously tried all of them now.
I'm kind of all three. It's a very sort of standard answer, but I mean, I've never had leeks. I've never had any of the food prepared like this before. I mean, I've had a lot of sausages, as you can tell by my waistline, but never one as fresh as that. The leeks, I've never thought about actually putting them into the embers to cook. And as I said, never had a salt dough lamb. And there's just something different about each dish, that they're all fantastic in their own ways. So yeah.
And as I say, they all seem, at least from my opinion, they all seem viable, that the grill could have been used for that rather than lighting, if not more likely. Definitely.
I mean, it's one of the grill is one of those items that you could have it hung on a tripod, like the Useberg tripod. You could fix it up on a stick over a campfire, or if you're in your hall or your homestead and you're cooking, you can have it hung up over that. So, and the great thing is that if you are cooking, as we found with the sausage when you were cooking it earlier, flipped it over, the fat goes down, feeds into the fire. So
it does. It's a nice flame grilled sausage.
Oh yeah.
So one other interesting thing about the sausages, I think most opinion is that most food would be boiled, and sausages in particular would be boiled.
Oh right.
But the texture is very different and a little bit chewy.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of, as you would have seen when you arrived, I pre-boiled the sausage, which cooks it through, and then you chuck it on the grill, so you don't end up with a black sausage that's pink in the middle.
Yeah.
And actually, that's like a historical technique that's moved into my modern cooking. If I'm doing a barbecue at home, I boil the sausages first, and they're pre-cooked straight on the grill.
Fantastic.
Get a bit of colour.
Yeah. There's
no checking if they're done in the middle.
Well, again, I mean, it's a bit like, if you're doing a barbecue, you chuck the chicken into the oven first. So.
Same thing, really, yeah. And obviously you do lose a bit of the juices and stuff will come out whilst you're cooking them, but then you've got the water itself can be used for stock. So potentially they'd boil a sausage and then use it to cook split peas or something like that.
Well, I mean, again, it's one of the, just putting that into context, the modern recipes, you've got your ham and pea soups, which, comes from the same thing. You boil the ham in the water, add the peas, there's your soup. I know there's a lot more to it than that, but
in simple terms.
No, I'm just really bad at cooking elaborate recipes. But yeah, I know it makes perfect sense. And I mean, that was absolutely delicious. I mean, I've, again, never boiled sausage before, just normally chuck them into the oven or onto the grill or onto the barbecue. So, it was a nice change and a very delicious change.
And then with the leeks as well, there's the other options to do it with other veg. You can do it with apples, turnips, anything like that. Even onions. If you put an onion in the fire and cut it down the middle, you can eat it as it is. Like, it doesn't need anything else. It's almost sweet from the sort of smokiness that comes through.
No, I'm trying when I can get the barbecue out again.
I was envisioning next time you're in the Smith and you just kind of...
Actually, I do occasionally cook on the forge,
so knock up some lunch in the forge. There's a leg of lamb in there whilst knocking up a grill.
I think the most elaborate I've done in the forge was a haunch of venison.
Wow.
Yeah. It took a bit longer than my lunch break, so I didn't go down too well. But I'm definitely going to be trying some of these.
Brilliant. Well, I've got a few questions, if you don't mind, that are just kind of ones I'm asking everybody.
I'll contemplate with a piece of the lamb.
Yeah. So we can go back, if you want, to the first question, which was unlimited budget, which you've already said not really into the idea, but let's say you were. Is there a project you'd want to work on? Maybe the Mastermyr find itself?
In India, they've got the Delhi pillar, and the Delhi pillar it's a column, I think it's about sort of 2 meters above ground, and it doesn't rust. And it's one of these ones where people say they didn't have the technology back then to be able to create this item. Almost no impurities in it. So I'd like to give that one, and that would need a lot of money. But otherwise, it would probably be the campaign cooking mechanisms employed by people like Henry VIII, where they were creating these huge spit roasts out of oxen and whatever they had going.
Sure.
Just because of the sheer size of it, the over-the-top lavishness, and just the fact that it's not been done on the scale that it was. You can see them heavily scaled back so that you can cook a pig or a lamb or something like that, but never or very rarely to the full size. And so that one would need a very hefty budget.
Big budget.
Very big budget. But also, actually, if you use iron as opposed to modern mild steel, then that would be another addition to the budget, but also another challenge, because the material is completely different. So mild steel, you can pick up a length of it in England, Australia, Russia, China, America, and it's exactly the same. It's got a recipe that all of the steel mills can stick to, and so it's just a very simple.
It's amazing that it's that consistent. You'd expect some variations.
And there are subtle variations, but I mean, it's within a batch of over 10,000 bars, or however many a steel mill produces. There will be slight inconsistency between those 10,000 and the next 10,000.
Yeah.
Whereas with the iron, the way that they would have created it, you could have an inconsistency over 30 centimetres or a foot. One end of a bar will be completely different to the other. The iron actually had a grain structure like wood, which would mean that it would be, you could work it, you could control it, but at the end of the day, if it wanted to split open, it was going to split open. And produces all of these other challenges to go along with it. And so being able to recreate the artifact with the original material, that's half of the fun of it. And originally the ATC had asked me to make or recreate the Mastermyr find, the entire 120, 125 pieces, which, as far as I'm aware, has only been done once by a group of American blacksmiths. And so it's never been done by one person. And again, there was a long conversation about the materials. Do we use mild steel? Do we use iron? Do we smelt our own iron and make it? And eventually, because it was a heavily budgeted commission, we had to use mild steel just to make it cost efficient. But again, that's one person's work, and so that would be a good fun one to do.
I've got a friend up in Cumbria who runs a place called Moorforge Viking Settlement, and he's also a blacksmith, and I'm fairly certain he said recently that it's on his to-do list sort of next year is to just work his way slowly through and recreate the whole collection.
Well, that was good to see.
Yeah. So another question for you, back to the food again, is whether you think you could have survived on a Viking Age diet.
I did, for 3 months.
You did?
I did. You didn't know that one, did you?
I didn't know that one.
No. So every year I take part in an event called the Chalk Valley History Festival, which is where I did the meteorite beads.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, we were doing, myself and with the Ancient Technology Centre, we're doing a Saxon encampment. And so for 3 months prior to that, I lived on a Viking / Saxon diet, because a lot of the time in films and TV you see Vikings and Saxons of a very specific, stereotypical image, rippling six packs and everything else to go with it. And the job I had on at the time was actually the Mastermyr tool chest, which was the 3 months prior to the festival.
Yeah.
And so I knew I would be doing blacksmithing the same way that they had been doing it when back in the Viking era. I wasn't going to be using power tools, wasn't going to be using modern equipment. So I thought I'd be doing the same activities. If I was eating the same diet, I could then go to the festival saying, this is the physique, this is how they would have looked, none of this rippling six-pack nonsense or any of that.
That's quite a level of dedication.
It was, only it was the food was wonderful. And I was adamant from the start it was just going to end up becoming very monotonous and just quite plain and boring. But the more I looked into it, the more I found. So, for instance, porridge for breakfast, and then suddenly it was berries were coming out on the hedgerows, and so I was picking them, chucking them in with it. Some nuts as well, a little bit of honey. Lunch was normally some sort of bread with soft cheese that I was attempting to make at home, and again a bit of boiled ham, that slice of that with me, and some other fruit again from the hedgerows, and then a decent dinner. The only thing that I really struggled with was the lack of caffeine.
Well, that'll lead into the last question of the bunch, which was tied in with that, is if you had to live in the Viking Age, what food would you miss the most? There you go. I thought that might be your answer. Instant. So you need your caffeine hit.
Caffeine, not instant. For proper coffee.
Yeah.
But it was... the reason I like coffee is the taste. I don't drink it for energy or anything like that. And what I found when I was doing this diet was that because I cut out the coffee, caffeine entirely, tea, I cut out processed sugars, in fact all sugar except for honey, and the natural sugars from fruits. What I was finding was that I would wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, and as soon as I woke up I was up and going. There was no sluggishness at the beginning, and I would just keep going at an energy level all day long, and then I'd finish work, get in my truck to go home, and my body would just go, oh, you stopped, and stop. And so I occasionally had to have a quick snooze in my truck to be able to get home, because I'm assuming that my body was processing energy very differently, far more efficiently.
Sure. And
so it was an interesting experiment. I mean, I'm not averse to doing it again, because as I said, the food was very enjoyable, and now you've got your fantastic cookbooks, we've got meals like this that I can chuck in with it.
Yeah.
And so I'll probably end up doing it again. But coffee was the one thing I missed. I think a lot of it was also because at the time I was pompous enough that I hand ground my coffee rather than just getting instant or pre-ground, and so there was that entire process.
You're going to say like a morning ritual almost.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Had just gone, and so it's a bit like when you see an ex-smoker, he still sits there with the biro stuck between their fingers. It was that same sort of thing. I was just would struggle a bit with the lack of, well, as you said, lack of ritual more than having a caffeine crash itself.
So thank you so much for coming on.
No, you're more than welcome.
I won't keep you for any longer. I know you're a busy man. So do you want to just let people know where they can find you online?
Yes, I am on Instagram as Village Blacksmith. I need to just sort of remind myself of these things occasionally. So Village Blacksmith on Instagram, and then on Facebook it's just Ian Thackray Blacksmith, and my website is villagesmith.co.uk.
Brilliant. I'll pop a link in the description as well, make sure that everyone can find the right stuff. So thank you again.
No, you're more than welcome, and thank you very much indeed for the fantastic food. Which I definitely did Vike it.
If you enjoyed the podcast and want to hear more, remember to like and subscribe and give me a rating. For recipes and ideas, visit my website saxonforager.co.uk. I also have 3 cookbooks available to buy on Amazon worldwide. These are Eat Like a Viking Volumes 1 and 2 and Eat Like a Halfling. Thanks for watching.